everybody, JK here from Animator Island. Welcome to today's live stream. Oh boy, happy Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday. Pretty sure it's Tuesday. Today we are going to be doing some coloring and inking of creature sprites for the upcoming game Mythic Ranch Cardfire, which my wife and I are working on. So let me start with some shameless self-promotion. If you've not heard of Weekend Panda games before, you can check out weekendpanda.com and see the games that we've made so far. And if you're interested in any of those, you might enjoy the upcoming game that we're making now. I don't know when that game will release because we are still hard at work on it and it's bigger than anything we've ever attempted, but hopefully sometime later this year. So with that out of the way, let's just dive right into it. Like I said, we're going to be inking and coloring some sprites. So I will fire up the iPad and we'll take a look. So here we have some of the creatures that are going to be featured in the new game in varying stages of being finished. You'll also notice some green squares. The green squares are top secret things that haven't been released or announced yet. So I just covered them with green so that they wouldn't spoil anything. But we're going to be working on the ones that are not bright green. So I thought we'd start off with Hamcot in the middle of the screen here. And I'm going to show you how I personally do the coloring on, or slightly shading / coloring on these creature sprites. So in the upper corner here, let me make sure everything is set up. I need to turn off references and things. All right. So in the upper corner here is the original sprite from Dylan's here. Hey, Dylan. The original sprite from Mythic Ranch Card Battles, which was the precursor to Cardfire. And this is Hamcot. He's got a little herb from the Mythic Forests in his hand. And so the upgraded sprite, that is the larger one on the screen, is the new Hamcot. You see it's very similar in design, shapes, all that sort of thing. But I've upgraded it a little bit, given him a satchel for the herbs, and just kind of cleaned up the lines and made it a little bolder and more visually interesting, hopefully. This one is not a dramatic change from the original, but I just wanted to upgrade them all a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I've already done the inking and the coloring, which we'll go into a little bit in the next one. I'm going to try and do 2 of these today, and the other one is still in the process of being inked and colored. So we'll kind of go in reverse. But we have the color on its own layer. The inked lines are on its own layer, and the color is on its own layer. And then I've started a new layer in between, and I'm going to make that a clipping mask so that it applies to the color layer below it. And then I'm going to go in and start giving him a little bit of extra, I don't want to say necessarily shading, but I want to give it a little bit of extra pizzazz. So I've decided the way to do that, the way I'm doing that for this game, is I'm going to create that clipping layer, and then I'm going to use the soft airbrush to kind of get in a little bit of extra color across the whole character. So what I've just done there is I've added this little hint of this purplish color at the bottom. And then I will go in, obviously, because it's a clipping mask, it only applies to what's being masked, so it doesn't show up outside the character. And then I will go in and I will check different layer effects and see if there's something that really speaks to me. So I really like this color burn. It changes things pretty dramatically from that purple color, but it does ground it a little bit more. So I'm kind of digging that right now, but I'll just flip through and see different ones. Darker color is kind of interesting. There's just normal. As you see, it's got that purple element. Lighten doesn't really do anything. Screen's interesting. Color dodge is nice, but I might want to use that more towards the top of the character. Add really jazzes things up, but I think it might be a little too extreme. A lot of these aren't doing much because I haven't made a huge difference in color on the one above it, but There's just a little bit of variations. Okay, so I think I'm liking color burn, and I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more higher up on the character just to blend it out a little bit more there. And then we'll keep the color burn for that bottom of the character, kind of just to give it a little bit of a subtle gradient, to just add some visual interest. And then I'm going to create another clipping mask, and I'm going to go in and uh, add some of the same thing, but at the top of the character. And that one will be just kind of a subtle highlight a little bit at the top of the character. As you can see, it just kind of changes it slightly. And then I'll do the same thing. We're just going to kind of go through one at a time and see if there's anything that really kind of pops or makes it more visually interesting and what I want to use. Vivid light's kind of interesting. It adds, that's kind of nice. I might go with vivid light. Sometimes I'll flip through all of these and I won't find anything I like. And then I'll just go back and either stick with normal, which is fine, or I will try again with a different color and things like that. So I'm kind of liking vivid light, but it's a little bit too extreme, I think. So we're going to drop the opacity down just so that it's a little bit more subtle, somewhere in that range, I think. And so this gives the character a bit more dimension, not a ton, right? It's pretty subtle. If I turn those off, you'll see that it's not dramatically different, but it just adds this little bit of visual interest that keeps things a bit more alive and, I want to say natural, but organic perhaps. So from that point, I'll have those, and then I'm going to do one more clipping mask layer, and I'm going to pick a dark purple. And I'm going to go in and do some more of a cell shaded style of shading. My phone is buzzing in my pocket, so give me 1 second. Sorry about that. It is my mother. So maybe somebody else across the room can take this because I am live on stream. Sorry about that. All right. It's one of the tricky bits of, working from home and doing stuff live is sometimes those things happen. Okay. So, all right. I have a hard brush and a dark purplish kind of color in place. And I'm going to go in and start adding some deeper shadows and things. So I'm kind of just going to add them where it feels right to me. This is not necessarily um, it's not necessarily with an exact light source, I guess you could say. I'm kind of doing this by feel uh, more than by specific accuracy, I guess. Oops. But I will try it this way, and if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't work, then I will go back and try again and that sort of thing. It's the nice thing about working digitally. You could just try things and see what happens. And I'm kind of doing the shading here based on instinct and existing knowledge. So as you can see from where I've put things, the light source is kind of coming from the top left a bit, but it's not, it's not exact. It's not 100%, and that's okay. I think we need to get something like that in. And then I will, you'll see in a moment, I will set this layer to, I think it's soft light I've been using for the shadows, and that will give me a really nice color effect. It's kind of fun with this really bold style, but I don't want to overdo it. There'll be time in other spots to overdo it. So for this one, I'm going to stick with something a little more subtle. Let's go in and add some shading here. And maybe one right here for kicks. All right, that should be good. And then I'll go into the layer effects and I'll change this to soft light, which as you could see, just tones down everything and makes it really, really pop. Really, I really like this effect. I think I'm gonna put it in paint in here too, and maybe a smidge here. All right. So there we go. That's going to be our shading on ham cut. As you can see, it's not dramatic. I mean, the soft light filter with the shading is a bit more dramatic, but the other stuff is just kind of there to give it a little bit of extra appeal and a little bit of more interesting feel. So then I will turn off the background and the original reference and original sprite, and there we will have ham cut finished, ready to be put into the finished folder, which I won't do because there's secret characters in there and I can't go into that one. But for now, we're going to go over to Hakuli here. Again, up in the corner here, you will see the original sprite. This was the original character design that I had for the previous game, and now I have added a little bit of a tilt or a turn in space. Right now, we've got this kind of a little more 3D pose. We've kept the original pose essentially, but we've made it better by twisting it in space and leaning the head back a little, and we've kind of just taken this to a slightly, in my opinion, better level. But this one is not finished inking. So I'm going to go through and ink this now. The way I work in order to ink things is I will create, or I'll draw my rough. I'll make sure that it is everything that I want it to be. And then I drop the opacity down. So originally I worked darker. I'll drop the opacity down, and then I will start a layer on top and begin the inking process. Then once inking has begun, I will start a new layer on top of that, and then ink different parts on the second inking layer so that I can go back and erase and get really nice clean lines, and I don't have to worry about them interfering with what I've already done, which you'll see in a minute exactly what I'm talking about. Um, but we'll just kind of go in, and it'll using this method allows me to draw over top of other lines without worrying about having to go back and clean things up in a certain way. So for example, if I want to do um, this back kind of like cape feeling bit, I will go in and I can do an overdrawing right there, which lets me get more of a smooth line than if I didn't do that. And then I can go in and do the rest. And then when I go back to erase, I don't have to worry about that original line. See, whereas down here, I'm going to have to be a bit more careful because the lines are both on the same layer. But once I do that and it's working the way that I want it to, then I can go in and merge those layers by pinching them together and then start a new layer on top of that. And I just keep working in this way so that I'm never in a position where I'm stuck. Freddie Leal says greetings or greetings. Greetings, Freddie. Good to have you here. We're just working on some inking right now. Okay, so essentially, I'm just gonna go through this and do the inking. If anything interesting springs to mind, I will make note of it. But otherwise, this is just kind of a straightforward inking process where I'm going to get it all inked, and then from there, we can do the coloring and things like that. And if anybody has any specific questions about Procreate or inking or coloring or animating or anything, just let me know. I'm happy to chat about it while we're working on this stuff. As you can see here, I'm kind of trying some alternates while I'm not sticking to that original line just to see if something else might work better, which I kind of think it might. I don't know, it might leave that. And so see here, here's another example of where, because I'm working in this 2-layer method, I can go in and I don't have to be exact and precise about that particular spot. And then back here as well. I'll just go to this other layer and I can erase away this line, and then it's perfectly clean and I don't have to worry about making it exact. The light's doing that thing again where it's for some reason turning dimmer. What's up with you, light? So weird. It just sometimes dims for some reason. Anyway, all right. So here I didn't finish that line, so I'm going to go ahead and add in another without making them all one yet so that I can clean it up. And then I'll merge them all together after it's all ready to go. Freddie says, very cool character. Hiley's here. And Edelanetti is an emoji. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Oh, I've made a mistake. Okay, so this should actually be in front. So we're going to go ahead and erase or redo a bunch of things there, or undo a bunch of things and then start over because I didn't realize, but that should be in front. So let's put it in front. So this kind of back cape should be behind the body on both sides because it kind of goes behind the character. All right, that's better. So we can merge everything, and then I'm going to also go back in and just kind of clean up this edge to take some of the harshness out of it because it was a little too pointy for down there. It is. I might add a little bit of extra curve to the inside. It's a very subtle thing, but I think that it this edge is making it, or it's not quite as clean and rounded as I want it to be. It's a little too angular. So I'm just kind of trying to take some of that edge off. There we go. That looks a little better. All right. That's all merged, so we can move on to the next. All right. Got them on there. Okay, so then I'll finish up the legs, and then usually I do the face aspects on their own layers, get them all exactly where I want them, and then merge them after I kind of move stuff around. Now, it may be pretty close to what the original is here because I already did that once with the rough, but I find that doing the face on its own layer really lets you move things around into the most appealing spots. Proportion when it comes to faces is really important. We're probably going to do a live stream once I'm hopefully over Lyme disease on face proportion, but I haven't gotten to that yet and not quite feeling up to it at the moment, but we'll get there eventually. And we'll talk a little bit more about that whole importance of face proportion and stuff. So we'll get the legs on there. And I'm not exactly sure because I kind of kept the feet rather uh, vague. So I'm going to kind of have to probably make up the feet as I go. But we'll see how it goes. Yeah, that's probably all right. Now, if we could just recreate it on the other side, we'll be set. How's that? I like the right side one better than the left side one, so we're going to change this side so that it suits, so that it matches the other side a little bit more. It's kind of got this kind of neat web effect almost on this side. So let's see if we can mimic on the other side. Oops. Yeah, it's a little closer. All right, got his feet on. And so now we'll work on the face. And again, I would normally keep the face to uh, its own layers, each individual element to its own layer. That way I can nudge stuff around. So, challenging shaped eye. Not quite. So a lot of inking, at least for me, is repeatedly drawing the same, usually circle shape. Um, Ito says owl, so I guess asking if this is an owl creature. So Hakuli is owl-like. Yes, this is from the Mythic Ranch universe. So it's not specifically an owl. This is a race of creatures that definitely have owl-like feels, and that's influenced the design heavily. Hukuli are a kind of a warrior race. They're one of the two warrior races that exist in the mythic forests. Used to be that he was the only one, or the only type, but there's now a second warrior type, not yet revealed. But the thing that I really like about this particular creature is one of his abilities on his cards are to ignore enemy shields. So because they are excellent warriors, they can ignore an enemy shield, which makes them tremendously powerful if you're up against a deck that is filled with creatures that have shields, because typically in the game, both games, a creature that has a shield will only take a certain amount of damage each turn, no matter how much attack you happen to have. So Hakuli ignores that ability, which means it punches right through. And since the shielded characters are also some of the more powerful characters, this balances it out by making it so that you have a way around people who just make decks full of shielded characters. Hey, that one almost nailed pretty much the first time, but not quite. There we go. Once I get warmed up, then it comes a little easier. All right, so with those on their own layer, I'm going to go ahead and do the pupils and the beak on its own layer, because then I don't have to worry about things getting in the way. And then I can erase and I can move stuff around, and I don't have to be super concerned with having to tweak things without them being on their own layer. Sorry, it's hard to. Usually, um, this is a very solo experience. Usually, because I'm just by myself doing it, but it's hard to talk and make these conscious decisions at the same time. Okay, let's get the pupils in there. All right. I don't like that second one. It's all right. But the second one is not quite where I want it, so I'm going to select it by itself, which is again why we work on separate layers there, and I can scoot it over a little bit and then that works a lot better. Oh, I'm being a little too fussy, so let's leave it alone. Okay, so with that, the way that it is, I'm going to grab the mouth here and see where I want to put it, whether it's closer to the center or to the side. I kind of like that overlap because once I get rid of this part of the eye, it will have a much more three-dimensional effect. Anytime you can get some overlap in there is a good deal. So you should try and do that. Then we'll clean this up just a smidge. Okay, good deal. So there we go. So we have them inked, and now we can move on to the coloring. We got a couple comments and questions, so let me address those. So Ito says, I don't think I'm familiar with this game. Oh, makes sense. It's not a super well-known game. The original sprite in the corner is from a game called Mythic Ranch Card Battles, which is available for Apple and Android, currently available if you're interested. It is a card battling collecting game, and it's made by my wife and I. So this is what we do a large portion of the time when I'm not working on Animator Island or freelance projects. We work on game development. So this new sprite is for our upcoming game Cardfire, Mythic Ranch Cardfire. It's a sequel to Card Battles, hopefully better in every way. We kind of learned what we were doing with Card Battles, and Cardfire is going to have multiplayer. It's going to have way bigger story, lots more characters, lots more creatures, lots of things to do. So it's going to be pretty massive. But that's the game. So if you're interested in checking it out, you can check out Card Battles right now on the app stores, or you can hang on and wait for Cardfire. I'll try and remember to leave a link in the description of the recording of this video. So why not? Hailey says, sounds ambitious. Yes, this is our most ambitious project that we've ever done. I am overwhelmed every time I open up the files to try and figure out what's going on. With the previous games we made, which were all relatively smaller, I was able to keep the whole thing in my head at once. I generally design the games. My wife is a software engineer, so she does all the programming, makes it work, and then I do the art and all the other stuff like that. But with this game, I can't keep it all in my head at once. It's just too much. There's so many different modes and so many different ideas. So I've had to break it down into like a 50-page design document. And sometimes I go back and read that document and I'm like, oh, right, I forgot about that part that I had come up with. So it's a very large game for us, two-person team. It's pretty massive, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully well, and people like it. And then Freddie says, what's the most complex thing about creating a character for you? Its proportions and anatomical shapes, or to think how much you can take it to the extreme in your poses? Those are some great questions. Um, Give me a second to think about that. And most complex thing about creating a character for you. So first, I would say it depends on um, the character. That it depends on the what the character is. Okay, that's probably the best way to put it. When it's something like this with uh, kind of creature design, especially cuter creature design, that's my wheelhouse. So for me, the most complex thing there is tweaking basic shapes to be the most appealing that I can make them. I'll create just dozens and dozens and dozens of characters, and then I'll find a couple that I like, and then I'll start refining them until I get something that I really like. So for me, that refinement process is probably the most complex part when it comes to this sort of character. When it comes to more of a human character, right, instead of creature design, definitely the anatomy is the hardest bit for me. Then from there, it's dealing with specific proportions, especially with the face. That's hard because I was actually analyzing some art earlier today because I found an image that had some elements that I really liked, but it wasn't. I can swap since I'm talking for a minute. It wasn't appealing at all. Like it was an ugly character. Not on purpose. It was supposed to be a pretty character, but something about it was just ugly, and it was like, this is not appealing. Something is wrong here. So I took it into Procreate. I started kind of um, drawing over it, and then trying to draw an alternate version of it uh, to build it ground up from kind of a gesture drawing. And I found out a couple things. First, the anatomy was very broken. The person clearly was a good artist, but they just, the anatomy did not work. It was wrong. It was wrong. It was broken. So that was the first thing that was jarring to me, and I figured that out through analysis. But secondly, it was the face proportions were just ugly. They didn't work. They were just um, off. So when I went back in and I started trying to do variations on the drawing, I also used the liquify tool in Procreate to move stuff around. It determined that they had made like the mouth. It's hard to explain because it's like a purely visual thing, but they made the mouth just the wrong shape and too big, and it just didn't work. And then they put the nose in the wrong place. If you flip the image, you could tell a lot better. So these little things that just tiny tweaks, especially in a face, become very complex and complicated, and you really have to nail them. So for me, the most complicated thing about creating a human character is definitely the face proportions um, and the anatomy of the figure overall. The body proportions, I've now done so many gestures that I kind of enjoy it. But the face, I still have a lot of work to do. And then when it comes to creature design, it's definitely the shapes and getting it to be the most appealing thing. So hopefully that answers your question. Be interested if anybody else wants to tackle that question. What's the most complex thing about creating a character for you guys? I'll share some of the answers if you want to chime in. Ito says you describe it like a Picasso. It wasn't. That was the problem. Like Picasso, he took faces and things to extreme places so that it was representational of a face. It wasn't supposed to look, I mean, like a face. It wasn't shooting for that level of realism. That's the Picassos that we know. Um, so it was an artistic decision. This didn't seem like an artistic decision. This one I was analyzing, this felt like a mistake. It felt like somebody who wanted it to be pretty, but it just didn't. I mean, it wasn't. It was just an ugly drawing. And I feel bad about saying that. That's why I don't show those analyses usually, um, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But it was an ugly drawing. I can say that. It's okay. All right. So we've got all this in place. I think I like where it is, but um, there's a part of me as an artist that's always just a little bit afraid. And maybe this is the same for you, where I don't want to mess up what I already have. Or what if I want to do something different? Well, the wonderful thing about working digitally is that we don't have to live with that fear because, unlike a traditional painting where you're literally changing what's there, we can go ahead and duplicate stuff. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of the inking that I've done so far, and I'm going to put it into its own group, and then I'm going to duplicate that group, hide the first one, and then flatten the top one. So now I have the inking by itself, but I have kind of this backup of this previous group. So if I ever wanted to go back and change something, I could. It just kind of gives me a peace of mind so that I can move forward. I have, as far as I know, I've almost never, maybe once or twice, gone back and used that backup where I've made a mistake and I'm like, oh, I don't like this anymore. I'm going to go back to what I had before. But it's just this kind of mental thing where I'm like, okay, everything's fine. It's there if you need it, but I don't use it. It's for my own emotional well-being. Okay, so there we go. We've got them inked. So now I said I would show how we do the coloring, and then we'll move on to the subtle coloring, and then we'll kind of probably wrap up for today. But we'll go to the inked. Oh, that's the rough. My bad. We're gonna go to the inked, and I'm gonna change the. I'm gonna change it to ink so that I know that it's the final ink. We go to that layer and we click on reference, and what reference does in Procreate is that it's kind of like it's kind of like a little bit of a clipping mask. It allows you to fill on a different layer based on the reference of that first layer. So for example, I will grab the color of Hakuli's body and I will take it over here. And even though I'm on a new layer, it treats it like the lines are on the same layer because of that reference tag. And I really like this because it means that I can, again, work kind of this non-destructive way where I'm not tying the color to the lines, and later I can go in and flatten everything. But for now, it just gives me a lot more flexibility. So I'm going to go ahead and use the existing colors on Hakuli for uh, all of, because I've already kind of done my color decisions in the previous game, and I like a lot of the color decisions, and I might tweak some things here and there, but for the most part, the colors of these characters, unless they're a new character, are going to pretty much remain the same. Again, I might change a few things. In this case, well, let me add the rest because it really matters um, to have it finished before I start messing with stuff. Eye color. All right. So zoom out. So there we go with our final, base colors that we have here. And I'll need to add the highlights for the eyes because that changes some things. But what I'm seeing here is that the kind of base color is, oh, Alien Slug King's here. Hey, Alien Slug King, says, finally managed to catch a live stream. You sure did. We just got finished inking this character, and now we're gonna work on some coloring. So um, I feel like a little bit the body color could be better. So I'm gonna mess with that a little bit and see what happens. If I took it a little bit richer, what does that look like? Yeah, I kind of like that better. Um, it was just a little too, yeah, I'll make it the whole thing. It was a little too subdued, I think. This just makes it bolder, I think. JP says Ferdinand. No, JK here. Ferdinand is currently recovering from a trip to the US where I got to hang out with him for a bit. It was awesome. Um, but he will be back live streaming soon. In the meantime, you continue to get me, and we're working on some character design and inking and stuff. Anyway, so I've kind of just punched up the color of the body a little bit, and I think I like that better. Uh, Typically, and if you've been with me for some of the previous live streams, you know that Color and I haven't always gotten along, and uh, I'm very hesitant to use extremely bold colors because what if it doesn't work and it can become garish and stuff. But as I'm continuing to force myself to use bolder colors, it's getting easier, and I'm getting to the point where I'm more comfortable making slightly bolder choices. So anyway, we're gonna jazz up that color scheme a little bit, and then that kind of um, that finishes the base level of colors. So what we'll do is, as we did previously, if you just joined us, we did this once before, we're going to make a clipping mask on top of the color layer. And then we are going to kind of just go in and play around and try and pick something that's going to be a subtle hue shift from where we were. And we're going to add that to the bottom of the character to just kind of give it a bit of a gradient effect overall. And then we'll mess with the layer effects to see if we find something that really works for this particular character and this particular design. I could give it more of an uplight. That might kind of be fun for this particular character. I don't know. Screen's kind of speaking to me, so I might go with screen. Let's just keep messing with it and see. Vivid does not work. Difference never works. I mean, it's always the ugliest thing. I don't know why. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there are some situations. All right, so I think what did I say? Screen. I think I'm kind of liking screen here. I might drop it down in opacity just a smidge to kind of keep it subtle. No, maybe I'm not. Yeah, kind of like it bold. All right, we're going bold. So um, that's what we'll add for the bottom of the character. We're kind of giving it a little bit of an uplighting on this. It just kind of happened that way. Oops, I don't want reference. I want clipping mask. And then we will go back in and we're going to do similar things with the top of the character. But since we're doing an uplighting, I guess I'm going to have to make that a little bit darker and richer. Let's go with a purple this time and see what happens. Can always change it, always mess with stuff later. Oh, that's kind of interesting. This is going to be way too much for what I'm going for, but we can start there and see what we can do with it. Darken's kind of nice. Yeah, let's stick with darken. We're just kind of adding that little extra depth to the full character here. And so if I shut those off, you can see this is where we started. It's base, it works, but it's kind of flat and it's not quite as visually interesting as when we add those extra little bits. It rounds things out. It makes it, it draws you in a little bit more because there's more visually things to look at. And that's what I wanted to shoot for this game, whereas the previous one, the original game, just had flat colors throughout. So from there, I'm going to go in. I will add in the shading. Now, even though we have almost this uplight effect, I'm still going to do my shading as if the light was from top down. So there, we're breaking protocol a little bit. And that's okay as long as you know you're doing it and you're doing it on purpose and stuff. But there's probably going to be an artist somewhere out there one day who, if this game does well at all, they'll take a look at this and be like, "Oh, the lighting's all wrong on that. Why did they have an uplight here and then shadows from below?" Well, I did it on purpose, so uh, you can have the knowledge that I meant to do it. So there you go. All right, so I will just kind of makeshift in the lines that I want to try for now, and then see how it works. And I can always tweak stuff after, but I'm gonna give it a go first this way. All right. And as I said in the last character, I'm pretty much just making stuff up here and seeing. I'm going very much with instinct on these shadow shapes. I'm not thinking necessarily about the lighting, which if I was trying to do this more realistically, I would pick a light source. I would think about each 3D form, and then I would change it so that each 3D form was properly related to the light source. But here, I am not super concerned about that because I'm keeping this light and cartoony, and I'm not as worried about that end of things. How do I want to do the cape thing? I think I might try first with just some shading at the bottom and see what happens. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we're going to try and see if that works out. Not sure if it will. Give the legs some shadow for the body. And I think that's everything. Going to keep the shadows kind of toward the bottom of the creature. And then I will go in and change it to soft light. And that'll give us our final look. Now I can see that because I've made this first arm so extreme in terms of, having like this drop shadow kind of thing, I'm gonna have to go back and other one too. Oops. So let me clean that up a smidge, and then I'm gonna go back in. And again, because we're working on all these separate layers, we can do this. We'll go in and add some shadow here too. Fill that in, and that'll give it a little bit of that extra dimension on the arms. Not a huge fan of this side, so let's tone it down a little bit. All right, that's probably better. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind that. Alien Slug King asks, every time that you add color to something, do you need to think of all the angles of the light source? Um, if you're working on, yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm putting these shadows in a much more graphic way rather than specifically thinking of the light source. Because if I was thinking of a specific light source, I would need to think about the three-dimensional forms, and I need to put them exactly where they belong. Um, I could probably just for kicks, let me show you what I mean. So if, and I'm just going to do this really roughly and quickly, but if the light source was coming in, like say from here, I would need to think about, for example, the eyes. Thinking about the eyes, the light's coming here, so the highlight's going to be on this side, which we'll put in later anyway. We got to put in a highlight. Come on, there, iPad, work with me. But if we think the beak is a really good example. This beak is kind of this rounded form. So if the light's coming in from here, then this is going to be the part that's not lit. And because it's a rounded form and it's coming off of the face, there's going to be a shadow underneath. Now, I added both of these, but I did not add them in the exact same way as you'll see here because I was not thinking about a specific light source. It's just what I wasn't thinking about it. Now, also, the eyes are sunken in the head, which means if we had a specific light source, we would put in a bit of a shadow here because there's going to be thickness to the face, which means that that part is going to be slightly in shadow. Also, these kind of feather horns at the back would be um, they would have some of the light getting trapped there. This side of the character is going to be more in shadow because that light source is there. And then down here, a tremendous amount is going to be in shadow. Probably all of this space down here will be shadow. And this isn't the brush for that, but that's okay. You'll get the idea. And then down here, this is also going to be in shadow because this is in front. And then the legs also shadow like that and shadow like that. Because again, the light source is coming here. Because of that light source, this back cape thing is almost entirely in shadow. So I would probably shade it more like this than what I did. And there, this is, this works because it's done quote unquote properly. But yeah, you would think about that stuff. You would think about each of the forms individually. And this is one of the reasons why it's really useful to practice simple forms and shapes and then think about the lighting on them because each one of these things is by itself catching light or in front of or behind something. And so to do it this way, you can really get an idea of all the different things. Now, as you see in my version, there's no dedicated light source really, because I've just kind of done this again graphically. I put things where they felt right to me, and then I've kind of moved on instead of trying to render this specifically in a really not necessarily realistic way, but a way that is true to a light source instead of just being more graphic shapes and forms. That said, I did kind of like that effect of the eyes. So let me just try and put that in and see what happens. If I were to add this kind of like subtle eyeshadow thing, I kind of like that. So I may put that in after all. It's very subtle, but I think it adds a little bit of a dimensionality to it. And then again, I need to put in the highlights. So we will get, uh, I will get very close to white And then we'll put in that on top of, I think, we'll just add a new layer and put in those highlights for the eyes. There we go. And again, if we were doing this more realistically, sorry to put that on the screen, I'll let it go. If we're doing this more realistically, we would make sure that those highlights are where they need to be related to the light source. But I've put them there because that's what they were in the original and it works there fine. All right, so I think that wraps up Hakuli. Is there anything else I want to do with him? I think for now that'll do for this. And then I may change it later. I may go back at some future time and mess with stuff and see how that goes. But for now, I think it works well. And yeah. Okay, so managed to get 2 of these creatures done today. We've got Ham caught before who we did, and then we've got Hakuli. And yeah, so chugging along. I've got 50 creatures to do. Interestingly, these are the only ones left. We've got Cosmonin up here, and then Cal and Shadebug, Tanglefoot, Kitsaro, Hakuli is done now. Hamcot is done now. Still got to ink and figure out the color scheme on the Lostlings because it's very difficult to design like shadow character and keep it simple. Like shadows are tricky bits of business. So I'm trying to keep the Lostlings like they're these little creatures that mainly dwell in the shadows and people don't see them much. Um, so I'm still messing with that. And then I've got those green ones. Oh yeah, I forgot about those. So I'll still have to do those, but it's coming along. We're coming along and we're getting close to that, to the finishing of the creature sprites. And then of course I have everything else in the game that still needs done. So much to do. Yeah, that's about it for today, though. Thanks so much for everybody for joining me in today's live stream. As I said before in the recording of this, I will post a link to the original game, Card Battles, if you want to give it a try. It's free on Apple and Android. Let me know what you think. We're still in the middle of figuring out the new one. I mean, it's mostly designed, but we're going to have a lot of testing and stuff to do. So if you play Card Battles and you like it or you dislike it, feel free to send me some notes on what your thoughts are because you never know what we might change for the future game. Um, Always happy to have feedback. But in the meantime, that's about everything. And Alien Slug King says, "Hope you feel better." I thank you for that. I do too. Um, I'm chugging along. This antibiotic medicine I'm on makes me nauseous like every day, which is terrible, and it counteracts any antacids. So I can't even like take something to make it feel better. But mostly, I have kept everything down, and I'm chugging along. Um, uh, Team Master says, "Is it on iPad?" Yes. All of our Apple and Android games should work just fine with an iPad. Be nice and big and hopefully beautiful. Um, so yeah, you can check it out on any pretty much any device that you may have. Okay, yeah, okay. I think before I continue rambling, I will leave it at that. I do not know when the next live stream will be, but I'm going to try and get another gesture drawing one in this week. So stay tuned for that. I'm hoping maybe Thursday or Friday. It's really going to depend on how I'm feeling and managing to schedule it in. I will check with Ferdinand when his next live stream will be. I know he's anxious to get back to it, but he's still trying to get all of his work in order since he's been away for a little while from the office. But he'll be back soon with some live streams as well, so you can look forward to those things. And that's about it. So thanks again, everybody, for swinging by. I will mention, which is always good to do, that Ferdinand does have, his 2D animation course. The links on the screen below. He's got the Patreon going, so you can swing by there if you're looking for some one-on-one mentoring and feedback. And that's a really great place to support him if you're looking for a way to do that. He works really hard on Animator Island, and I'm glad that I can contribute too. So if you're looking to kind of lend him some support, that's a one way to do it. But also, we really appreciate you guys swinging by for the live streams too. It really It keeps things fun and interesting. And I know that we both appreciate it. So, okay, that's all for today. And we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.